Welcome to the Trades Podcast, a podcast about the business of home improvement and promoting the trades to young adults.
That's right. Promoting the trades to young adults, to new generations, upcoming generations, past generations, anybody and everybody that wants to listen and hear more about the trades, because that's what we're doing today. It's a great day. I'm DJ Danny.
And I'm Jeff.
And this is the Trades Podcast. We're super excited because we have an amazing guest that's going to be joining us here today. And she absolutely comes from the background of the trades. She's a welder, Yale alumni, nonprofit founder, the director of operations of companies, and she's absolutely pushing the envelope to make sure people understand the opportunities, the future, and where a lot of exposure is happening right now within the trade. So we're super excited to have Demi Knight Clark in the house. Demi, how are you?
Great. Thank you. So excited to be here.
Yes, us too. We were just off camera talking about a few of the projects that you got going on. But before we dive into, everything about you, your company, and everybody that you're involved with, let's have you introduce yourself to the Trades Podcast world.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Demi Knight Clark, as you said, and I got my start. Well, actually, I'm a third generation. I'm a fourth generation woman in STEM and a third generation welder because I had a grandmother who was a Rosie in World War II. I did not realize that was a unique thing until I was really into the trades maybe 15 years ago when people were like, that wasn't everybody. They might have had a grandfather serving in World War II, which I also had that in the Korean War, but not necessarily the grandmothers and certainly not Rosie's. So it was super unique to have that and an Army Ranger dad growing up and an older brother. I was not raised in a household of girls necessarily, but had a lot of that influence that actually turned into gender neutral and just saying like, throw them all out there. And that's how I walked into going into the trades. I was in construction, my first job out of college, thanks to Y2K. I'm dating myself. I am a Gen X. Like that was when I came out of college, was right at 1999 of Y2K, which sounds ancient. And then the failure of .com boom. And so it was like very similar to where we are right now, where people are saying, oh, it's AI and technology versus hand skills. We've been through this, and I can't even say there's previous generations of Gen X that say we've been through this in multiple generations. It's, whether you want to call it a tech industrial revolution or something else. I had to come out of that, and I chose construction because I was looking for what is the most stable industry that I won't get laid off, because I had been in tech and got laid off 3 times within 2 years, and it wasn't anything I was doing, it was just funding. So that really started it off in the early 2000s and got to kind of ride that wave of exactly where we are now of saying, hey, let's, I don't want to say eradicate is a really strong word, but the trade, by nature of the choices we made politically as well as industry wise, we went towards uh, programming for Google and having those types of jobs. And we went away from having vocational tech, which was my favorite class in 7th grade, using the drill press in middle school, back when we could still do that. And I was talked out of it in high school by guidance counselors who were like, oh, you're complete college material. So it's wild for me to see, especially with welding instructor friends, even to this day, no matter what their generation is, where it's like welding or jail, like that kind of conversation is still happening, instead of, oh, if you're the college route, you're going here. So I think it's a really interesting place to be now. Here I am 25 years later, and I've been in just about every industry you can imagine in C-suites, but then also starting my own company, starting my own consulting, starting my own speaking. And now I'm back into industry. So still speaking, still running some camps through Spark Force grants, thanks to the Fabricator and Manufacturers Association, which I think we're going to talk about, but also jumping right back into an early stage company with Handheld Laser Institute and saying, okay, this is a place that's putting it all together. We're building explorers. We're training the next generation of welders who want to get involved into handheld laser welding. And it's going to take them to Mars, to the moon, to multiple different industries, and they'll be able to kind of name their ticket. So it's a great time to be talking about the trades, in my opinion. And I always look at everything from the fact that it is an opportunity as opposed to saying, I cannot stand the word shortage. When I hear about it, all I think of is, I think, startup mentality of like, that's massive opportunity. If there is a lack of something, there is an abundance waiting to happen. And what do we need to do to scale to get there? What resources do we need to find? What people do we need to see? And then let's just go test it out and break it. So Probably a little longer than you wanted for an intro, but that's me today. And any given day it could be something else I'm jumping into, but it's usually in the center of the future of what we're looking to solve for in the trade.
No, it sounds like you've got a lot of things going on that are all focused on, things that you're passionate about and things that are making an impact in today's world that needs to be fixed.
Hope so. We need a lot of people right now, in terms of solvers, and then the ones who just want to roll up their sleeves and get dirty, literally get dirty out in the field.
We want to thank our sponsor. Superior Flooring Cabinet Designs is one of the landmark family-owned businesses in Encinitas. Owner Cheryl Robertson, with years of customer experience managing her family's hardware and cabinet business in North Park. Cheryl Robertson and the Superior team dive deep to learn about your project and help you find the perfect solution for your flooring and cabinetry needs. Call today at 760-436-0900 or visit www.superiorfloors.com.
Yeah. So when we were off air talking, Demi, before you started, you mentioned something about welders going to space. And 5 years ago, when me and Danny started this podcast promoting the trades, I said a few things about that, and I got foo-fooed on that several times. So
Well, I get it all the time. I'm telling you, I almost got run out of Fab Tech 2 or 3 years ago when I walked around and I said, my hashtag is welding is STEM. Hashtag welding is STEM. And I had so many people, usually more older school folks in the welding industry, and primarily men, not to make it about a gender, but that's who's in welding. And that's totally fine. It's a statement of fact, but saying like, absolutely not. It is not STEM. Do not go down that road. And I had to unpack that for a minute to say like, okay, and that's kind of my nature, is like, I'm not going to get hurt by someone or like take it personally and say like, oh, maybe I should stop talking about something. It's just, I lean into that and say, okay, tell me more about that. I mean, why is that? So I started analyzing it, and I really had to unpack kind of my history too, that I just told you at the beginning, of saying our generation, we've watched not the eradication, but this natural just evolution out of trades, unless you're in an ag specific county or state, right? That is just absolutely central to what the industry is around them, with big CTE schools supporting it. Most areas are not the case. And that was more to go towards the Google generation that was doing programming and supporting a digital footprint of businesses. So here we are going backwards. So they were associating STEM with more white collar jobs, pushing out the trades, pushing out blue collar. So once I figured it out that way, it was like, hey, listen, we're on the same page, we're on the same team, but it is STEM. What I'm trying to do is get it back into the narrative of middle schools and high schools, and especially high school guidance counselors and parents who have a stigma against it. But when they hear STEM, which is very accurate for welding, by the way, and many of the trades, because of what they're doing on a daily basis and what they're using resource wise and have to put towards the effort. It is STEM and technology and engineering and math and science, but especially welding and metallurgy. We're doing a disservice to the next generation by not explaining it that way, because this is not only a digital generation and digital natives that have grown up in Gen Alpha, which is up to 15 years old, and then Gen Z, who's up to 30 now, which is crazy. But they also know STEM. It's been really, I hate to say it, but pushed down their throats to say
yes,
like, oh, robotics after school, all these things. And the parents are like, sign me up, sign me up. So I'm trying to merge that back in a conversation to say, why wouldn't you just, if you want a low list solution, let's see how we can put welding back into an after school program. We'll get around the liability of insurance. And, yes, you're actively having inert gases and you have torches. You do have to be safe and have PPE and all the things, but you can put that back in part of your STEM robotics classes and have them fabricate things. So that was what started the conversation for me, but it was really interesting, Jeff, to your point, to say like, it can get some cockles up of people. And now it's the same thing when I say welding in space. I was just at Space Symposium. We were the only welding company that was there with Handheld Laser Institute. And we do bridge that gap of saying like, we have welding engineers, they work at SpaceX, been heavily in the aerospace industry to break that apart and put it back together. You couldn't find better people in the business to do it. So it's a unique place to sit, to be able to go to different, you can go to FabTech and speak our language with all the welding community, which are all of our friends, but then we can go to places like Space Symposium and have these conversations with VAST and Blue Origin and SpaceX and everyone who's doing all the things for the space economy, government agencies, and they understand the power of, oh, we do need welders. It's a different definition of what welding looks like. So It comes with its benefits, but there's definitely people that will say, you're crazy. What are you talking about? There's not gonna be welders in space. There's gonna be a lot of things in space, and welders is just one of them. I'd like to call it technicians, really, because 'cause they're gonna have to know how to weld. They're gonna have to know how probably to do HAC, multiple different layers of fabrication in a different way than we do it terrestrially. That's all things we don't have solutions for yet. So, pretty cool world ahead of us.
Absolutely. You can just imagine, being the first bricklayer on the moon.
Right,
You're
and
not
we
you're
will
not
need that.
shipping a brick up there.
And that
You're
might be 3D printing your bricks, right? But that's a
100%.
bricklayer.
Yeah, I mean, to have people on the moon or Mars, you're gonna have to have places for them to live, work, you know? You're building out with the materials that are available to you. Technology is gonna go through the roof in the space programs the next decade.
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree.
Yeah.
So, and with that creates tons of opportunities.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and again, I think it's all narrative, not to just overuse a word, but I probably will for the next, however many minutes, is, just I say this everywhere I go, is just think about how we speak about the trades, or think about how we speak around the younger generations in terms of opportunity, and do we come from that kind of scarcity complex of saying like, "Oh, we are in a labor shortage," or "We're in a workforce, just chasm." I hear all these, like, crazy terms. They're listening, they're hearing that, and they're thinking, "What is opportunity?" They're a bunch of builders. I have 20 now 22 and just turned 20-year-old daughters, and I hear a lot of it from all kinds of sides between their friends, and then I run a camp. And so I see it with the middle school level, and they're just sponges. So they're so ready to hear all of this and say like, "Okay, so what's the opportunity? We're already builders. We're already digital natives. So don't bore me." If anything that blows my mind right now is I can go to camp at Reimagined Rosie's in the next couple of weeks, and see these 11 to 13-year-old kids, and we'll just think the bee's knees is like VR, AR, and giving them Meta, Oculus glasses, and we can teach them how to weld. And they're like, been there, done that. I can do that in like 10 minutes. Put a torch in my hand. I want to learn the handheld skills because I don't have an opportunity to do that at my house, or, there's really not third spaces anymore. Our camp is a third space, which is not home or work. There's not a lot of places for kids to convene. So we see this yearning in that middle school age group. So I think if I could give no other, unsolicited advice, it would be just think about how you're talking about it if you truly want to see opportunity be talked about with any generation, whether it's the parents, whether it's the career transitioner, because of the economy, because we are creating new economies like the space economy, rather than just Earth space. But then also with Gen Alpha, I can't say enough. They're looking for us to say, here are the jobs you should be going for, and it shouldn't just be scaring them off by AI or whatever's coming that could potentially, replace a lot of the tasks they would be going for with jobs.
Absolutely. Yeah, they say the construction industry's been horrible for a couple decades, if not more, with marketing themselves as a job opportunity. So changing the narrative, what you're talking about, Demi, about how to talk about the trades, how to talk about the stigma of um, you're a construction worker, blue collar. You need to go to college, you need a white collar job. That's changed.
It's completely changed, and also, I mean, honestly, I could walk in. I actually last year when I was heavy consulting, I went in and was a substitute teacher whenever I could in a district in my district, just to say, you know what, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not an educator necessarily. I'm not a classically trained educator. I can run a camp. We could teach people to weld in 4 days, but that doesn't mean you're qualified to be an educator. So I would just want to. I'm a huge data nerd. I'm always doing that. That's kind of the consultant in me at heart, is to just figure it out of saying like, do I have enough at hand to be saying some of the things I'm saying? And I just hung out with kids, and it's a wild world, I will tell you, from a lot of standpoints and points of view. But just from a sheer fact of what I think we were talking offline before we got on here, of just giving them credit for what they already know and then letting them explore. They don't have emotional intelligence yet. A lot of us don't until we're a lot older. Has to be a learned trait. They're not mature yet. Of course, I call them baby vampires because they really are in a crazy time in life. But it really is, I say this in the nicest of ways. Pre guidance counselor intervention is everything right now. we have all got to be focused on that laser focused particular age group is 11 to 13-year olds, and really 10 to 14-year olds if you really want to go there, because then they get into high school and they start having these sessions with guidance counselors and teachers who want to kind of mold them either college or not college. And I don't want to make it about that. I am literally trying to figure them out to say, hey, yeah, I'm watching them be explorers at the middle school age because of what they know, right? In 2026 and what they've learned growing up as digital natives. Now, what can we add to them in terms of how can they be empowered to walk into high school and say, oh yeah, I've tried this. I want to go in that direction. And that guidance counselor may or may not know what that direction is, but they can say, oh, okay, like let me go find resources for you. Whereas for the last, I think, 25 years, we have not done a great job in equipping guidance counselors on anything but saying like college statistics and what the state is requiring for that. We haven't really educated them and gotten them up to speed of how well the trades are doing for that generation, both financially and from a just career ladder, right? Of like, you don't have to stay in this industry. You could, it's not a college or no college either. You can go get operator certificates, technicians. We've got robotics technicians all over the place in manufacturing. And then they could go back for an associate's degree. They could go back just for a bachelor's and then go for a master's if they want. They want to get into leadership. There's the choice is theirs, right? So I think it's just kind of blowing up the paradigm of what we think a career ladder truly is, and then just leaning into that middle school population and saying, let's equip them with things that they have muscle memory on. So once they get into the place where they have to start choosing, they actually are pretty empowered to speak up and advocate for themselves and say, oh yeah, I like that. And I'll give you one example, and then I'll be quiet about it because I feel like I'm taking up too much
Oh,
time just
keep going.
sucking up the air. Is I saw this a lot, last year when I was heavy consulting of saying in workforce development, and it was some of the apprenticeship programs. And I certainly I am as pro union as you're going to get. I think it just depends on the situation of how well we're into that territory. If it's a unionized or non-unionized states, I'm in the South. I'm in North and South Carolina, and so it's a bit less down here. So where it is huge and really proficient in getting those jobs there, great, awesome, let's go. But at the same time, when you go in and you see that same population that has been guidance counselor driven to say, hey, we think you should be an electrical apprentice. We've got XYZ in terms of trade or unions or not unions, but there's an apprenticeship program XYZ and it's 4 years long. You can become a journeyman, all the things. They have zero baseline of what that equals. They're just hearing pressure from a couple different sides, usually parental, and then from a school perspective, this is your route. Like, this is really what's going to be best from you based on whatever test you've taken or all the things. And then those kids are quitting because it's just, I mean, college is 4 years for most kids. So we need to do a better job of exposing them to that again at the middle school level. So they're like, oh yeah, that is for me. I absolutely want to go down that road. I know it's 4 years. I know I can get paid from day one, but I understand this so that we don't necessarily have that turnover rate because they were kind of pushed into a decision that says, this is you. Go for it because this is what we think is best for you. But then we've given them nothing to say, is this the right choice for you? Really? Again, I like to look underneath a little bit of the skin to say it's not just a surface level challenge or problem. Let's like peel back the layers to see what really is there.
What is one of the ways we can peel back the layers, exposing them to people that are actually doing the trades that they're looking at?
I think so, and I know that's not as easy as it sounds. I've had a lot of people ask that of like STEM teachers. I think a low lift way is to, if you are in the trades, it kind of depends on where you sit, right? If you're like, I'm so passionate about this, I want to get this involved. I want to see more kids involved in this, and I'm a CEO in a company. Maybe I'm an HVAC company. What do I do, Demi? I always say try to get into the middle school level and start talking to your STEM teachers. If there's not a CTE program, because again, not every school district has this. It's potentially been replaced by other programs like STEM. Try to partner with them because 9 times out of 10, those teachers are either from another piece of education and they've had this be kind of assigned to them. I've met so many of them who are like, I was never in this to do an after school or to do a robotic program or to do like a STEM club. So I'm just trying to come up with ideas. Like, can you help me out? And I didn't realize that until I talked to a teachers group in Texas that was a massive district, and they were all like, "You're assuming that we all just come from these backgrounds and we can teach all of this stuff. We are so craving programming. So if you have a plumber, like how do we reach out to our plumbers in town? How do we reach out to our electricians and our business owners that are in trades? And I was like, wow, I can't, me, myself, and I solve for that, but I can just keep telling people, hey, if this is where you sit, if you're an educator, go look for those people in your town. And many of them might be the parents of your kids that are in your classes. So start asking around in your PTAs and all that thing, or that piece in your school district. But then also for the business owners or for the people that are in the industry, just go and ask in school and say, hey, is there a STEM program or an after school program? Because you can add hand skills to that so easily and say, what are you fabricating? They're probably already using 3D printers. They might be fabricating, some are soldering, which is, gateway to welding for me, soldering and brazing. That's HVAC guys. You get into plumbing really easily. If they're not doing that, it's the gateway, right? To say like you could so add what these kids are craving, which is building things. So I think that's a quick, low lift way to get involved, to start asking around that, because they're so prevalent and it's a club. And then on top of that, just start saying, how, if you're a company owner, especially, or if you're in a place, in a seat in a larger company where you have influence over their workforce development, how are they speaking to the generations, and who are they actively recruiting? I used to say this, I used to be at the largest home builder in the world at D.R. Horton, and that's where I really cut my teeth. And they put me on the road after about 10 years of going to colleges and construction management programs to speak to them. And one of the big challenges at the time, this was mid 2000s. They're doing a tremendous job now, but mid 2000s, we were really looking for female assistant superintendents, which was coming out of the construction management program. And so it was coming back from these school fairs, which was usually the spring season, and saying, hey, I mean, we've recruited maybe for 68 divisions across the country, maybe 10 to 15% are female. And it was like, how do we do better? How do we see diversity here and get to more like 30%? And so another way is just saying like, okay, don't look at the surface level statistics. It's not anything anybody's doing wrong. It's what could we be doing to be more exposure? And once we started taking a look, me as a woman, I wasn't even really looking at it until I said, it's all these colleges, terrific programs, amazing construction management programs, but everywhere I'm going, there's 25 students and one of them is female, and we're getting the one female. So actually that's tremendous statistics, but at the same time, we can't make them get more women into their program. We can't solve for that. What we can do is say, okay, so if that's one of the goals, is to diversify the program either from gender or ethnicity or whatever that looks like, should we be going to HBCUs? We weren't going to any HBCUs at the time. Which is very multicultural and had great programming. And it wasn't for any reason on purpose. It was just saying it was a miss, right? Or seeing some of the programs that could have been more geared to having more women in them, to say like we were naturally skewing the statistics before. So it's just, that's what I'm asking people to do, is just say, don't look at the surface and say there's a shortage or there's a lack of something. Just say, okay, that's a statement of fact. We see that statistic, and now like let's kind of like peel back the layers and see where could there be opportunity here. We're like, what are we missing? And if nothing else, go talk to the field. At the end of the day, this is just business 101, right? Whether that's trades or otherwise, if you want to know how your operation is doing, go to the first layer of defense of operations, right? Who is operating? I'll keep it to a welding. Who is a torch welder, arc welding out in the shop? They're going to tell you every pain point possible. And then go to HR, and then go to the shop foreman. And the shop foreman will tell you the real recruiting issues. And then HR will kind of tell you the stats, right? So it's just like, you've got to go to multiple different layers of people to say, we're solving for this, but we need to have a lot of POVs in the room.
When people are talking to, say, a high school student about a career in different trades, Demi, does that high school student relate to a certain age bracket differently? Like, you might have the owners of a company that are in their late 40s, early 50s, the shop foreman, early 40s, but the person that's got 2 years past their journeyman level, mid 20s. Is there a better way of relating to these kids to tell the story, do the marketing for the?
That is such a great question, Jeff. I think it's again multi-layered in my answer. I think a mix is terrific. For them to see, hey, what can you aspire? If it's small business that's doing really well in their city, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. These kids really connect with entrepreneurial tactics. Now, could you be a CBRE or a massive company? Of course you can, but you have to speak to them in small pockets. And I don't think that's generationally specific, honestly. I felt the same way coming out and saying like, oh, I would love to work for a huge company, but also if someone from a small business had come and told me, I ended up in startup culture, and that's where I thrive after years in corporate America, saying like I just kept trying to be that cog in the wheel that didn't necessarily fit because I was a little too paradigm breaking. I was too bleeding edge, right? Of like always wanted to solve for the future tense that we may or may not have been prepared for. But I was never really exposed to that. So I think exposure there at an owner level, or if you're a massive company, you can still do that, but make it down into the pockets of opportunity and like task forces that you could run if you were to join as like an assistant superintendent or things at that nature. But then also, yes, that 2-year journeyman, I think seeing someone almost at their level and at least in their generational group is really important to say, oh, it's not paving the way. It's just saying in 2026, this is a better picture of what it looks like. Because here we are in Gen X and millennialdom telling them as adults, and they're like, anyway, I mean, you've got to relate to them how they are absorbing their information, which is definitely on their phones. And I'm not saying just go make a TikTok account and do like ridiculousness, but just relate to them the way that they consume. And the ones that are closer to their generation are going to understand the pain that they're going to want to solve for, or the stigma that they're trying to go up against. I'm telling you, there's still, I would say, bring a parent of that same journeyman to come in and talk to parents. We don't talk to parents enough. We don't bring them to, most career days I found last year when I started diving into this, career days for trades versus like college career days. Parents attend college career days with their kids. Parents do not attend trade career days at most high schools, like 96%. It's a ridiculous statistic. Now, tell me what's the disconnect there, because the parents aren't invited or the parents don't necessarily think that's important for their child, and you're going to have to talk me into the trades. I don't have all the answers on that, but I can certainly make some assumptions to that of where we need to be doing it differently, of saying, hey, this is something that's a massive opportunity, financially, emotional growth, personal growth and entrepreneurial growth, all the things. And you should be there and hear about it, because they're making the final decision when their kid makes the choice, but they're not involved in the exposure. So I think it goes back to the exposure again, and saying like I don't want to be confusing because I feel like I just kind of took you all over the map, but the more populations, the better, but be very specific to the ones you're sitting in front of. And then see again, just keep peeling back the layers, just keep breaking it and saying like, just because we have a career day doesn't mean 1,000 people are going to come out because we just put a shingle outside, right? What does 2026 kids want to hear about? They want to hear about, I could be a welder in space, or, like what is it that they've been doing? They've been gaming. I say this a lot. I'm like, I keep seeing kids just pick up VR, AR, no problem. And I keep hearing educators are like, oh, VR, AR is the future. I'm like, no, it's not. These kids have already checked that box. It's like Just Dance in early 2000s with my kids. They hit Rasputin and they don't want to go on. That was like no other dance. They could have cared less about anything else. They mastered that one. And now that's like having a resurgence on TikTok right now, which is very weird to see. But see what I'm saying? Like, go to where they're consuming and then do the thing. No one has embraced gaming, and I'm just waiting for them to do it from a trade perspective of like, don't do it in VR and AR and expect them to be impressed. Put it in some type of like game scenario. And I'm telling you, I haven't figured it out yet, but like that's just the world they live in. So, I'll stop with that because there's so many ways to just go be curious. Like right now, I'm a lurker on TikTok. I hope that doesn't mean like people come through my feeling. I don't post because I don't know what to say. I don't really know. I'm not there. Like no one's listening to me on TikTok. It's not my audience necessarily, but I am there studying how people are reacting to information. And we have a huge potential there. And I'm still seeing a lot of just pranky kind of welding videos. And I'm like, shake my head, and I see it on Instagram too. It's all well and good. So be it. We all need to blow off some steam, but we're missing a lot of boats there of saying like we could be talking about trades differently here.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, and preparing the future. I think you said it pretty well also. I mean, it's the exposure, it's how companies are really communicating with each other, and I think that there's always been a little disconnect, but the trades I don't think has ever always just gone with the trends. It's always been pretty straightforward. It's, put something in my hands and I'm going to get some work done for of what's being asked in front of me. But it's also listening to what's being said out loud. And I think we were talking about it earlier about big tech is paying attention to the trades now. because they realize how essential it is to build their infrastructure, to get people exposed to these opportunities. But I think it's, the big tech is one thing, but I think you're part of a lot more companies that are really, again, coming out with more creative ways to start connecting the two, from the generation splits to the stigma that the trades used to have back in the day growing up. They were eliminating a lot of the trades from schools. Now Jeff and I, we're experiencing a little bit of the opposite, where they're starting to implement them back into programs, whether mainly it's at the community college level, I would say, a little bit more. But hopefully it's going to start moving into more of, like you said, the younger generation, into from 11 years old, middle school, all the way through high school, because that's really where you start getting that exposure. So I think it'd be a perfect time for you to kind of dive into a little bit more of your workforce, and your startups that you're working with right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest to that point is maker spaces. When we were talking about welding as STEM earlier, that's another big opportunity I see where it's low lift. A lot of schools, middle school or high school, and I also realize there's a more insurance liability on the middle schools. High schools are usually covering that because they are potentially doing auto, HVAC programming, et cetera. Just depending on the level and the appetite in whatever their district is. But middle school is just across the board wiped. I mean, if they have after schools at all or clubs within the school, you're doing well for yourself, in your district. So it just runs the gamut, and then insurance it could be a huge liability for them. But most of them have maker spaces. So, not only those clubs, but then also saying, hey, is there an opportunity? It's not just 3D printers in your makerspace. Like, that's the new narrative for saying shop class is a makerspace. But we just have to put those hand skills back in there and say, we've already got the space. How do we incorporate and in what way and what does that list include? Again, exposing them to things that they just didn't know existed, but yearn for, because I cannot say enough. And I'll speak to it from our camp with Reimagined Rosies, which is STEM to Space Camp. We started for the first year last year in Hemet, California. It's Title I school district with Alexandria High School. Last year we had 42 kids, and we did it for a week, and it was just by the grace of walking by the Fabricator podcast, and the FMA booth, because I was waiting for a friend, Nate Bowman, who is weld scientist. He is a collaborator with myself on this camp, among other things we've done together. Uh, I just started talking to the Sparkforce Foundation, which is a nonprofit segment of the Fabricator Manufacturers Association. And I said, I've got this crazy idea, but I'm not an educator, and I don't like, this isn't going to be a full-time job for me. I've got to start connecting to Gen Alpha, and we've got to get back into these middle schools. Funding is just dried up for this. You don't see a lot of grant funds for this. And they're like, oh, funny you say that. We actually do small grants for camps. So go do it. Go try it. And honestly, I give them all the credit in the world for saying, you don't have to be an educator. You don't have to know what you're doing. You don't have to have had curriculum. We'll help you figure it out and they have so many resources. So I tell educators this all the time. If you, or just your businesses, they're funding. I mean, clearly I think it's 300 camps across the country right now that are all manufacturing camps and run the gamut in terms of topics in all 50 states. I think there are like 48 states, and Hawaii. So they've really grown this over 10, 15 years. So we started with a week, and I said, I want to do it all. I want them welding, but I also want them having to design build. So they have to really get into that. Let's break it. Let's design it. Let's figure it out. And they're thinking about the space economy. And like, I could be going and working at NASA. And that's where we did our field trip, was to NASA. So these kids are thinking bigger. They're thinking exploration. Yes, they could go down the street and do rocket boosters with X Quadrum, and do heavy, heavy manufacturing on that, or go to the stainless fabricators down the street who are also doing tremendous work. It doesn't have to be in space, but it's just getting them connected again to the things that make sense to them, they've seen in their lifetime. And they're like, oh, okay. And that doesn't become about blue collar, white collar. And it was amazing to see the success from these kids. They were in tears. We were in tears at the end, and having to leave and come back to the East Coast. I was like, wow, I don't know what to do with this information, but I know this is necessary. And so Dr. Josh O'Neill, who is all the things, CWI, CWE, CBS, and then also just a great sport in his school district, and Hemet ISD, they were all for it, really backed it. And now here we are, 4 weeks to scale. Was telling you all offline, 300 applications of families, and because it's all funded and supported, they don't have to pay a dime. We had to narrow that down, and we took 62 kids this year. So week one was last week. And Josh was fine. We had some TAs that were graduates of the program last year, of the high school welding program. And yeah, I mean, just to see, it breaks my heart that we couldn't have 300 families, but it also tells me this is something. And the more people I talk to, they're like, I would have signed my kid up for that. I don't care what the level of school, where it is in the country. That's the coolest camp I've ever heard. And I don't mean that to me. It's just the idea of a camp like that. So that's how I'm putting myself into it, at least to the middle school population now, is to say, okay, after this, the 4-week period that, again, we've had a grant cycle that has been a blessing for us so that we can just go and do this and break it. We're building lunar rovers, air quote, lunar rovers with them, this time in the 4-week progressive build. They just started last week. And basically saying this is what we would be doing. Again, if you're going into the space economy, but you don't have to do that. There's going to be companies across the country that this is what welding looks like. If you wanted to go and weld, you could be a robotics technician. We have Universal Robots come in and they do their cobots. So they're seeing all angles. We do actually do VR, AR, and like voyage arcs and all that thing. But I mean, they just breathe through that part. So it's more of like, hey, let's have fun and let's reinforce what we're learning here. But then the more hand skills we can get them into, the better. And I think that's all kids, whether they're interested in welding or not. Just go on to TikTok and see how many lives they're on, or YouTubes. That this is a YouTube generation, my kids included, who are 22 and 20. They don't go and Google things. They literally go to YouTube and say, oh yeah, I have to build a desk. Like, what's the model number? And they go and YouTube that thing. That's huge in terms of solving and saying, hey, well, we're doing the same thing when we're remodeling a bathroom. So I just kind of tap into that and say, okay, what do you want to learn? You could go YouTube how to weld, and some of them are, right? And I'm seeing that in laser welding. People are really Googling and YouTubing that and then watching a lot of crazy stuff. But yeah, just lean into that as well, of saying that's not hard. That's not hard for us to tap into and say, well, if you can YouTube that, what about going down this road, and then let's get your education started over here, and then that the world is your oyster on social media.
Can I ask a question that's kind of reverse of what we've been talking about space? Ocean exploration. It seems with technology that there's a lot of things that are pushing the limits that we've had in the past. Do you hear anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's really off of land is a huge emphasis. And I mean, I think as I'm saying narrative, it's almost come out of, I don't want to take away from the word manufacturing, but that is such a like all encompassing word that covers so many different industries, right? I think the more that I'm hearing the word infrastructure, that's where we need to be looking, and that's where we need to be teaching, is to say, here are opportunities in infrastructure for the next 20 years. We're building, like we were talking, we're building data centers, and there's the new American Workforce Academy coming out of a combination of partnerships from CDRE, I think Associated Building Contractors, and then Meta. There's multiple tech companies getting involved in the workforce of tomorrow, but also the factory of tomorrow. You Google that and you'll find out all kinds of, not just automation, but just efficiency. And so I say, look at where are the infrastructure opportunities where we're being builders. And where you have builders, you will never be able to take away the handheld skills. We can talk automation all day, but you are always going to need to have someone that's doing the critical thinking that either fixes the problems of whatever the automation is happening, or, just like you can say Elon with Tesla, when he immediately said, I want to do automation in the Tesla factories, and it just kind of blew up in their face a bit. He backed down and said, hey, it's not full automation ready. Like, we need humans to do this. And so I think there's going to be that joining. I mean, I live in a place where we're joining things. We're joining and fabricating. And so when is a human necessary? And when is it something where you're just better off saying, why would a human want to do 500 parts and pieces and widgets all day, every day, the way that our grandfathers did when it was an 80s GM factory? That's just basic efficiency. Like, why would you're just bettering life for someone? So I don't want to go and sell that job on a kid. I just don't. So anyone can fight me on that, but you have to teach them to say, no, you're going to walk into a potential factory or a place of your workforce in infrastructure and manufacturing, and you have to be the engineer. You have to be the solver of a technician. You have to break apart a part and be a shop foreman for a minute, and then you have to be an operator. How does that sound to you? And that's very entrepreneurial in style. And yes, of course, that will have a title, but that's how these kids think. And the more that we can put it in terms of that with infrastructure, that could be the ocean. That could be doing oil and gas rig, or oil and gas pipe, with welding, which is very traditionally kind of old school, but lots of money in it. But it's going into the future too. You could put any in ag, you could talk about it from an ag standpoint, automotive, all the things that are pushing forward. Even look at automotive. Now we're looking at the air taxis. You know how much infrastructure is going to have to be behind air taxis? A kid could go get a pilot's license and be a welder at the same time and just name their ticket or be a fabricator of some sort. So that's what I think, it's tools in the toolkit. And I keep going back to, we're building explorers in infrastructure. And so I'd love to see that term even used even more, in the next 5 to 10 years, of saying, like, rather than say super industry specific, and we can of course go down into sub industries as people get curious and want to get involved in things to where they can be an expert or a subject matter expert. But really it's just infrastructure and saying what needs to be built. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be built or planned for.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I mean, everything that we've talked about today, from the job opportunities, from what's being out there, what needs to be pushed, space exploration, how much of a need that there are for skilled workers, and even skilled just even retirees, I would say, people that are exiting out, they can absolutely come back and bring in their perspective into these new limelights of opportunities. We can tell them, oh, this is the good old days and whatnot, but we can absolutely come back and say, these are the days that you're going to remember that you started a career and it absolutely catapulted you into an industry that was brand new, almost in the sense, like you said, we're restarting fresh with AI and new technologies and infrastructures. So now it's that great opportunity I think a lot of people need to get more exposed out to. And Demi, I mean, you're right at the front. I think it's awesome what you're doing with your organizations and your team. Um, I mean, we want to give you a last chance right here. If you can, what would you, what's your message out there? I know it's probably more than just one message, but go ahead and, like, what would you tell someone coming out of high school, or parents that are talking to their kids going into high school, about what do you think about your plans in the future?
Yeah, and I think I'll also tag on to what you were saying about the dreaded R word, retirees. I mean, I turned 50 this coming year, and I mean, it's a very Sally O'Malley, like, I'm 50 years old. I can't wait. I'm excited. I'm going to run my 13th marathon, most likely. I love to, again, like, big shock. I love to bust paradigms. And so I don't, I certainly feel 50 in my knees on a, like, when it rains and all the things that comes with aging. But I also don't want to just subscribe to what somebody thinks is a 50-year-old. And I think, not to speak just to that population, but you definitely hit it on. Gen X is about to be the next retiree generation, whatever that looks like. And we're kind of breaking that apart already, the oldest of us who are starting to do that process and say, what is that? Is that me golfing? Is that me on the beach? Or is that me taking on something where I'm solving again and I'm using all this stuff? And again, I'm not saying that to judge any other generation, but each generation that hits these milestones is going to do it differently. And so I can't wait to see, lean into that, yeah, right? And, like, learn all the skills, go get certificates, go become a robotics technician if you really want to, go back and do trade skills, go do the carpentry, like, do all the things, right? Just do all the things. And I think that's my overarching to all generations, is just always ABC, always be curious. If it's a high school generation, be curious. If you're a parent of a high schooler or a middle school, let them be curious. Don't be let them, put a ceiling to their curiosity and say, "Oh, I'm going to have an engineer." Like, how do you know? You have no idea. Were you an engineer? 9 times out of 10, you weren't. So, like, why are you projecting that on your kids? Just let them be curious and go find all these different places they can be exposed to a ton of stuff across the board, so that there's just more well toolkitted individuals growing up in this economy. Same thing for career transitioners. If college kids got out there and they're disenfranchised, okay, start over. We've all, I mean, I can say that as, again, soon to be 50-year-old in the next 6 months. It's like, I started over probably 5 or 6 times. So if I ever hear HR directors who are trying to sell jobs, or career counselors going to colleges or not colleges, that age bracket of 18 to 23-year-old in career selling, and saying, like, oh, absolutely, our career ladder is this. Like, I don't know any company anymore that is truly a one career ladder. Most people have moved, you know, millennials really proved that with, like, kind of a 2-year span. And then we went through some different economic pieces where it was just layoff after layoff. So, but I think the average person goes through 5 to 7 companies in a career. So why would we expect any different? Let them, like, this is the opportunity to build. So if you're a career transitioner, see it as nothing other than like you're creating a patchwork quilt for yourself of a resume, and you're just adding all these things that by the time you're my age, going to be a subject matter expert in a bunch of things that you can say, well, what's going to solve next? I can bring all these different me's to the table to say, oh, well, I didn't do it that way then. That was a great learning experience. Maybe I should bring that to this. So it's all perspective. But I think just whatever generation you're in, just break up what you think like society wants you to do, or what even you're thinking like, hey, I'm going to change careers and it's going to change, however XYZ amount an hour, or it's going to XYZ amount a salary a year. Yeah, but what is the cost of sitting where you're sitting and absolutely hating life and your job and doing all the things, and it's just because society wanted you in that title? Like, I don't know who's telling you that. And the same thing for kids. Don't project ourselves onto our kids or what we think is going to be success for them. Let them define what success looks like. They already proved us wrong with TikTok. Honestly, they monetize like crazy on that thing, and we were like, oh, that's never going anywhere. That's silly stuff. And I'm not saying that's the end all be all. I'm just saying they can be onto things. So let them go explore, right? And that's kind of my end message is whatever your age is just be curious and go out there and learn stuff, and don't be afraid of what's coming.
Yeah, I love that.
Embrace it.
ABC. Yep. Embrace the curiosity. Always be curious. And everybody, we've been sitting right here talking with Demi Knight Clark. She's a TED Woman expert. She's a TEDx alumni, keynote speaker. She's at the front head of everything right now, and we just can't wait to hear more about what you got going on, Demi.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's been great to just talk with you. I feel like we can keep going, and we will. I think we're gonna have some more updates in the future of what you got going on and have you back on. So really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and talking to the Trades Podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, this is Trades Podcast. Make sure to share with everybody, and we'll see you next time.